Is it completely out of the picture to consider new races appearing in future expansions? When they create a song, do they typically have a name in mind and they name it first, and then the writing team goes, yeah, we're not going to call this song Epic Battle Music number 24. It has to be something specific. Should players consider meta events, like map-wide meta events, to be like a thing of the past, or could we potentially expect to see them in the future?
We love making metas. We've got a lot of people that love making metas, myself included. Are we never going to see them again?
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Hydrated Gamers podcast. If you recently jumped into Guild Wars 2's newest expansion titled Janthir Wilds, then you're going to be thrilled to hear the conversations I get to have with all four folks around me right here. They're all developers at ArenaNet. They played a role in bringing to life Janthir Wilds. Let's jump into it and start with some introductions from everyone's end. I'm gonna go ahead and list, the title of everyone. People wanna know what profession or class you guys play in the game. Let's go ahead and start off with Nick. Nick, you've been a game designer at ArenaNet since 2019 and have progressed to a senior game designer over the years. But when people think about game designing, right, it can extend to a variety of things. What did you work on within Janthir Wilds? And of course, what profession are you playing within the game?
First off, thank you for the introduction. It's very kind of you. So I was the map team lead of Lowland Shore. That was what I was doing within the game. And what that means for me is that I was essentially the individual responsible for ensuring that the entire team that worked on Lowland Shore was set up for success, that we were hitting our milestones effectively, that we were meeting our goals. Alongside that, I implemented some content myself, because even if you're a lead, right, it's nice to still get to work on the game. So some of the things that I had created were the heart within the Harvest Den. I created what we internally call the Fight Club, but I think it got named Smooth Brawl Fields, right? So that kind of stuff. I was also the individual who made the salmon run in Lowland Shore, if you know what that is. Those are just some of a few of the things. So I do a lot of world design as an individual contributor, and then I was also the team lead for Lowland Shore. As for professions, I am a die-hard since day one Reaper Necro main, Power Reaper Necro more specifically, and then my secondary is Daredevil Thief. But if you look at playtime on class comparison, it's 90% Necromancer. I love to spin to win. I love being a Beyblade, and it's just real fun.
Thanks for sharing a little bit more as to what you're doing within game design, because it can really extend everywhere. Let's go ahead and move on over to Erin. Erin, you've been a writer since 2020 at ArenaNet and leveled up to a senior writer in October 2023. Tell us a little bit more in terms of the story-wise of Janthir Wilds. What was your focus there? And people want to know what profession you're playing.
I ended up writing half of the main story chapters. Indigo and I divided the chapters amongst ourselves, so we were both co-leads on writing the story chapters. And I was also the narrative lead for the Lowland Shore map that Nick had just mentioned. We did a lot of tag teaming on that to make sure the characters and story and tone were all cohesive throughout that map. And then just to name a few specifics of what I worked on, I had written the chapter 3, where we received the homestead. So I did a lot of the character work that involved Stoic Alder and his son Pokey, a lot of concept and development of the characters we meet in the Lowland Shore, like the council members, a lot of the villagers, the heart NPCs on the Lowland Shore map, and a lot of the event NPCs, particularly a lot of the unhinged ones. So those are some of the main points of things I worked on for Janthir Wilds. Regarding my profession, I play a warrior quite poorly. I am not great at the game, so my best skill is to just go out and punch things.
And that's what warriors do best, honestly. Great class to pick. Well done. Well, thank you very much, Erin. Great to have you here. Chloe, you've been a game designer since 2020 with a focus on designing world bosses such as End of Dragons. I'm going to be honest with you, I'm a huge fan of End of Dragons. I even got Suwon tattooed on my arm, so well done with that. I did want to ask, though, a little bit more in regards to the elements you covered story-wise within Janthir Wilds, because you did become a story design lead in the summer of 2023, so congrats. So what was your focus there, being a story design lead? And again, the question of what profession you play within the game.
Yeah, hello, I'm Chloe. So I actually started in 2019, the same day as Nick did. I started out as a content designer for maps. My first release that I worked on was Forging Steel. And like you mentioned, I worked on the Suwon fight in Dragon's End and some stuff in Echovald. But I switched over to story design for the What Lies Beneath and What Lies Within releases. I did the story for that. And then for Janthir Wilds, I was story design lead. So I did a hefty amount of the story. It was a combo of me doing like oversight as lead duties, but also like Nick doing implementation as well. So I had fingers in most of the pies of the different chapters. So, and then yeah, the profession that I play. Since day one, I have mained a female char thief. Usually these days I'm playing Deadeye, but secondarily I will do Daredevil.
Fellow thief main here, awesome choice. You're spread across everywhere within Guild Wars. Even since 2019, you've done so much for the team. Awesome to have you here, Chloe. Last but not least, we do have Indigo. Indigo was in a previous Hydrated Gamers podcast, if you haven't watched it. When Secrets of the Obscure released, you took, aka the raid commander role of being the narrative lead at ArenaNet. So genuinely curious, what was it like leading the narrative team as they worked through, writing stories, chapters, characters, all things Janthir Wilds, and of course the profession question at the end as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think some leaf blowers decided to start up right as I started talking, so let me know if that gets too loud. It was such a joy. This was the first year where I was the Guild Wars 2 narrative lead and kind of having a lot of fingers in a lot of different pies across the game. But for Janthir Wilds was really special to me because as a long-term player of the game, kind of spanning back to prophecies, this has a lot of my interest personally as a player too. I love the Mersat lore. I love the White Mantle lore. But being a narrative lead at ArenaNet is a really interesting position because it's very hybrid with a bunch of other departments. So in addition to helping Erin with the writing on the Golden Path and supporting Chloë, however I can with formulating these stories and figuring out how we want to convey them in the world, it's also collaborating with just about every other department. My co-lead on the expansion, Andrew Gray, who is the design lead, he and I pretty much have eyes everywhere. We work with our art departments, we work with our audio department. When we're not working on the expansions, we're working on things like festivals. It's just being a narrative lead is finding narrative consistency across the entire game and world. So there's a lot that goes on, and we have a lot of stories moving at any given time. But it's really fun. And Janthir Wilds, especially for me, was a joy just because it has been so anticipated by players for so long to go to Janthir, and we got to dig into some really good lore. I mean, Mersat are so much fun. The White Mantle are just vile, which makes them really fun to write. But yeah, so that kind of summarizes that. So it's really just been a joy. And in terms of what I'm playing, so I think we talked about it last time. I'm a diehard Mesmer main. So that's probably where like 99% of my time goes. But over the last couple of months, I've been trying to up my game in some more specific professions. So I've been banging my head against Power Catalyst for a couple of weeks now, which is kicking my butt, but it's fun. It's a good challenge.
Just to kind of reiterate, everyone who was here in this podcast episode today, I have to be clear. This isn't everyone that brought Janthir Wilds to life. There are a lot of other developers at ArenaNet who have done an amazing job alongside these four. These were just the people who were able to sit down and chat with me today. So let's jump into all things Janthir Wilds. I got to start with the first one, the location. With many different regions and continents within the world of Tyria, how on earth did the team at ArenaNet decide that it was time to go ahead and head north of Divinity's Reach and explore Janthir?
So when we start figuring out what we're going to do for an expansion, like location is kind of one of the first things that we need to figure out, and we tend to crowdsource ideas from like the whole studio. That was one of the common ones that came up, and ultimately was the one that we went with because it has a lot of rich history and lore, but we also have never been there before, either in Guild Wars 2 or Guild Wars 1. So there was a good opportunity to explore a new place while like having some established lore, enough that we can have like a foundation to build upon and add new stuff. It really gave us a lot of like creative freedom, and is something that like a lot of players have wanted to know what the Janthir region is like. So it's kind of a win-win in that way. Like there's a lot of potential there, but it's also and it's unknown enough that we can really like do some new stuff like the Kodan.
That's really the power with it. When anything is unknown, zone. You know, you guys can really think, okay, well, what kind of species are around, all that kind of fun stuff. It was great to explore Janthir for the first time. Spent way too many hours that night playing. It was a blast to jump into it that launch day. But when it comes time to like placement of maps within Guild Wars, specifically like Lowland Shore, Janthir, Sintrai, does the team ever have to have like, you know, an exact spot picked out? Or I don't know, are you guys like blindfolded and you go, okay, this place that, you know, let's just throw it there and okay, this is where we're going to put this map. There's got to be some science behind it, I imagine. There's a big giant body of water called the Janthir Bay between Lowland Shore and Janthir Sintrai. And previous expansions, they always had zones placed right next to each other. I'm curious, why did the team at ArenaNet spread the zones across? Was there a reason as to why you guys wanted to implement it that way?
Ultimately, what it really boils down to is just what are the needs of our design goals and of our narrative goals, right? So it's like we choose a specific region of the world. For expansion 1, it was Maguma. Expansion 2, it was Alona, et cetera, right? So we knew that we wanted to come to Janthir, as Chloe said, to tell the story of this space. We then go down a layer. It's kind of like a layer cake, where then it's like, okay, well, what are the core beats that we're looking for, right? Like we wanted to have the Lowland Kodan be represented in this space, and we also wanted to be able to onboard you into the dangerous spaces of Janthir, Janthir Sintrai. Once we go through that process, we look at what the best places are within that overarching region to serve those goals. And so with the Lowland Kodan, we wanted to aim for a more kind of cozy space where you could, to some extent, get to actually know these people and the strength that they have in all regards. And so we felt that potentially putting that in Janthir proper, which is supposed to be this like hard, very rugged space, would not best serve us for success with that. We looked at that. We also looked at biome diversity, right? Like map diversity. Like we do utilize the existing parchment to some extent to get a better understanding of like, well, what do we have known to players to some extent, and how can we utilize that space for gameplay? So we looked at the Delta for Lowland Shore as an example, and we were like, wow, this really could allow for a lot of biome diversity. It can allow for a lot of kind of like distinction of gameplay and elevation. So we just were like, okay, instead of sticking these maps together next to each other, right? Like we can narratively bridge that gap. We can like, we've got portals. Portals allow us to do whatever we want, right? So essentially like we went down another layer to the gameplay elements and found that like the distinction of like having one be on the islands themselves and one be closer to the mainland area just felt right for what we needed to do to accomplish our goals, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yeah, it does. And to be honest with you, I like when zones aren't matching in between, because then you just kind of think, hey, what could be between? They have this much space, and you know, speculation on Reddit or Discord servers, people are drawing it in Microsoft Paint. Oh, this is what the new map could look like in between, which is just, it's like that child creativity that if you guys are going to continue making maps, I think having spaces in between make us really think, okay, what can happen in between? So that makes sense as to why you guys implemented it that way. One thing that is truly awesome about Guild Wars is the feeling that you get when you play the game. Moments when you're charging into battle with like 50 plus people running at a world boss, 30 of them need revives. It's okay, guys. We got you. Press F. We got you. Or other moments in the story where I'm running away from danger in Path of Fire and Blish stays behind, and I'm still crying to this day. I cry every time I play that episode. But how does the team at ArenaNet find that sweet spot of balance when it comes to using humor with characters? Maybe not using humor. It's a very serious moment. Perhaps picking out what areas or story instances happen to weigh in more to make sure players feel a certain way. What is the process behind making those decisions as a game developer?
This came into play a lot, particularly in the Lowland Shore map and defining that tone. Because when we set out, we wanted to keep the tone centered around being cozy and having that feeling of home and family, because we knew that would be the location where your homestead would be. So we wanted to really lean into the comforts of this feeling like your home village. And also like getting to know the townspeople when we open up in Janthir. This is the first real place we get to know. So making the players care about the Kodan who live there, making it feel like the town is alive and real people live here. So to lean into that, we can definitely do more of those charming or more silly events to get to really hit that feel home. So things like the dance circle are closer in the center of town, or like the friendly fight where Barb Vale beats us up, or like the bee event, stuff like that, where it's a little more wacky or just like kind of the charming feeling of being like in your home and doing silly stuff. But then, you know, Janthir is also this very like dangerous place. It has this like reputation that precedes itself of having like danger. So we wanted to keep that apprehension and that sense of like that there's something bigger out there. We wanted to like balance that within the, okay, our home is here, but we are in this dangerous place. So when, we're eavesdropping around town or we hear ambience, we hear little snippets of things that are troubling, like, oh, the harvest or the weather, things have been unusual. So we get these little moments that we can latch onto of, oh, there's something greater out there. And we also get like a lot of more emotionally charged events as we get more into the wild and start dealing with nature and the threats that are really out there. So an example of this would be like the Valraven event that opens up a much darker tone and like an opportunity to explore grief more, which is not very cozy in tone, obviously, but it does relate back to the topic of family. And that connects back to some of what we see in the story in that area later when we get the homestead and we see Pokey and Alder, what they're dealing with the loss of Silken Ware. So we have moments where we see like these different characters in different like kind of iterations of their personality. Like in the beginning, we meet Pokey and he's more cheeky, he's laid back. But then as we get into those quieter, more quiet moments where we're at the homestead and he's like reminiscing about his mom. These are all elements that really like tie into the personality and the life experience of this area and of this town. So it really comes down to figuring out what parts of the story are happening in what areas, and then sort of like what overall tones like overlap into those chapters, making people feel at home, but there's room for humor and the relaxed atmosphere, but then connecting back to the overall thread of the story and that sense of urgency and the deeper emotions that all get interwoven into that.
It's really cool that you brought up open events that happen, because there is a different feeling when a fire is burning in a village, and then another thing where it's like, okay, like I'm gathering food for a feast, and like there's a different tone, and I guess even the voice actors can express that too with the NPC. Gather up some wood for me, please, for my hut, or whatever it might be. And that's just really cool that it's not only story elements that have emotions, but even when you're running around the open game world, like events are going to have that too. It brings us over to many of the things that we see while doing open world events. It wouldn't be an expansion in Guild Wars 2 unless there's some new antagonist that we get to throw things like spears at. Since we've battled elder dragons for almost 10 years and dealt with demonic beings called Cryptis last year, what led the team to bring the Titans into the spotlight as the, I'm going to say, antagonists for Janthir Wilds?
Without revealing too much about what's to come with our Titan friends, because that's on the horizon, when we knew that we were going to be coming to Janthir and we were looking at and taking inventory of a lot of the local known lore to this region and new lore that'll be coming down the pipe as well, the Titans lined up as a pretty great enemy. One of our big goals kind of at the beginning of the expansion was to lean into larger bosses that were more of a threat versus an entire army of them. So that's how we landed on the Titans kind of being that primal focus, with their minions and the Titan spawn being secondary. That allowed us to lean into the Titans as individuals. Decima and Greer were very fun to sculpt in that way, give them big villainous personalities, really have fun with it. But they also accomplished a couple of things for us as well with their weight. In addition to being kind of pivotal to local lore and relevant to stories that are yet to come, these are also beings from the myth, just like the Cryptis that you mentioned, and that helps us kind of remind players of some things that we kind of brought up in that expansion too, which is that there are a lot of mysteries left in Tyria. There are a lot of mysteries left outside of Tyria. So the Titans are evocative of a very different kind of threat that the world is dealing with now, especially following the dragon cycle, where everybody is scrambling to get everything together, start forward progress in the world, especially now that they're not fearing the imminent destruction of the elder dragons, of something like a rogue god. But while the Titans are menacing, it also is not necessarily a world-ending threat in terms of scale, like we've seen before. Like, these guys are very dangerous. We clearly haven't figured out how to deal with them quite yet, but we're well on our way, potentially. But that's definitely a threat that we think we can counter, so long as we can get along with our allies long enough to figure it out. But they're still at the same time very destructive, very menacing. We put all of this time into making Harvest Den feel like a hub of comfort and coziness and warmth. And even though we had to demonstrate our worth and our value to these people, because they very much are very self-sufficient. This is a very rugged group of bears. They have been tormented by the Titans as well. So that gave us some additional kind of motivation to help our new friends, especially with the umbrella of the Tyrian Alliance kind of being what propels us forward.
It's so interesting with Guild Wars, so many different walks of life, many different creatures. You could go from fighting demons in one expansion to, okay, we got to face some rocks, you know, like let's go up against some giant rock people. Okay, pretty dangerous, but I'm on board. Like, count me in. So I'm genuinely curious with, you know, what's the next chapter in Janthir Wilds brings with facing the Titans. But many different walks of life. You mentioned, Indigo, these big bears that are walking around, with the Titans being a force that are always there. The Kodan are right on the doorstep there, and they have to deal with it on a day-by-day basis. I'd like to understand, though, even though the Kodans are fighting the Titans, how on earth did they get such a cozy looking spot for their village in Lowland Shore? Like, whoever bought those cabins, like, they got a good rent price, you know, things are looking good. You got rainbows, waterfalls, all that stuff. As it seems, their village, it fits perfectly within the Lowland Shores. So when it comes time to filling up a map, both with creatures, NPCs, what steps does the team at ArenaNet take before a green light is added to get something implemented within a brand new map, whether that's creatures, environments, like all those things?
That's a big question. I think all of us have a lot of work that we put into that, and I'm sure that everybody will have a chance to weigh in on this. But I think ultimately where we start out from, similarly, is the highest level goals of like, this is the area that we want to put the creatures in. This is the story we're trying to tell. These are the goals we're trying to meet. So one of our overarching goals for this space were like, even outside of the Titans and their minions, right? Like, we wanted this area to feel powerful. We wanted this place to feel like naturally powerful even before the Titan presence gets known to the players. So to do that, we had to think a lot about, well, what natural creatures would live here that would make sense that, like, if you swung at them, they're going to swing back and they're going to, you know, like, put up a pretty good fight. And then how does that interplay with the Kodan and their the kind of like balance key and like the inherent strength keys that we were looking for, or goals that we were looking for. So essentially, right, like, we looked at the natural creatures, and then we looked at how those interactions would happen with the Kodan and also with the Titan minions. So really, it's just looking at those high level goals and thinking about what creatures would best fit in this space, and then also having a lot of brainstorms. Like, at ArenaNet, we brainstorm so much. It's actually kind of troublesome sometimes because of how much time we actually take on it. But essentially, right, like, we want to make sure we get everybody's perspectives. We want to make sure everybody gets a chance to weigh in. So a lot of it is thinking, like, just toss your ideas, throw them at the board, right? Like, what do you think would be a good thing to have here? And then we can take those ideas and make sure that all of, like, we're holistically covering. And then when it comes to, like, overarching layout, it's about what sub-narratives are we trying to tell in those spaces, and then how did the creatures in that space influence it. So in Harvest Den, you will notice there are not many baddies because of the fact that, like, it's their den, right? That's where they call home. That's where they're going to guard it the most. In the, like, fishing village in Lowland Shore, as an example, right, like, it's mainly fish and fish-centric things that like to eat the fish. And then where you go into the hunting outpost is where you see more of the, like, just wild, raw nature. And then, of course, you go to Janthir Century, which is, like, just, like, there is no holistic ingrained Kodan presence, so that threat can be much higher over there while still hitting on some of those key, like, nature is powerful themes. So I guess from, like, the kind of open world development map perspective, that's some of the process that we take.
I can actually weigh on this also. When we are figuring out the layout of, like, a map and what goes where the village is, where there's higher combat areas, a lot of that is also informed by, like, what we're trying to do with the story. So, like, Nick and I, well, all of Lowland Shore team, but especially, like, Nick and I were, like, doing a lot of collaboration on what are the needs of story, what are the needs for open world content, how can we kind of blend those. So with, like, story, my goal is to use story as a way to sort of breadcrumb player, like, through the map, show the cool stuff that map designers have made, but also, like, having that pacing that the story needs. We start out on, like, the eastern side of the map where it is a little bit more, like, cozy, it's more chill. There's the village. We get time to, like, learn about the Kodan and all of that before we start to kind of head west the next couple chapters. There was definitely, like, a lot of, okay, well, we want to put, like, maybe can we have, like, some of the, like, more homestead centric, like, stuff, like, around the fishing village? Can we have a bunch of little homes there? Can we have a bunch of like Kodan that are like collecting wood or out in the wilds, like to kind of like support that notion of like they're building stuff. They like this is part of their culture. And then as you sort of head like the most west, it's more of like an outpost. And so that really helps support like some of the stuff that happens in chapter 4, where we're starting to kind of get an inkling that like something is wrong and there's more of a threat than the Kodan are initially letting on. Sometimes it's actually like also the reverse, where like the map can inform what ends up happening with the story. So like, for example, the map designers, Nick and everybody, wanted to put a new version of like the Cryptus rifts in the maps, right? Like, so, but this time it's like Titan spawn coming out of the rifts. We were working together on like, okay, well, we want to put these in Lowland Shore, but with story, you're spending a bunch of time in Lowland Shore before you get to the point where it's like, oh yes, these are Titans. There was definitely like collaboration on like where those events might go, but it also ended up at the end of chapter 2, actually put in a section to actually kind of highlight that, to go do some of those rifts, to see those things coming out of the rifts are not Cryptus, like what are those? And so there's a little bit of like, ooh, what could this mean? As you encounter them more as you go through the map, there's like, you're kind of planting those seeds of like, okay, there's definitely some weirdness of these like unknown new creatures happening. Yeah, so there's a lot of basically collaboration between me, Nick, narrative team, like the map artist. We basically all figure out what everybody's needs are that we want to try to touch on, and figure out like a good combination of those things that sort of work together cohesively as possible.
Makes sense. And you brought up so many interesting points, specifically when it's multiple teams. You know, it's not just one person who's locked in a closet going, all right, go ahead and make Lowland Shore's map. We'll see you in 10 months kind of thing. Like, it's a bunch of people working together to accomplish all this. Nick, you did bring up the brainstorming session. Sometimes you guys are kicking yourselves in the butt going, are we spending too much time thinking about something before we implement it? I guess before Guild Wars 2 came out, I think this was 2009, maybe 2010, there was a trailer that one of the game developers said, we treat our maps and environments like characters. Every single expansion that has come out for the game, it's like every area I visit, I'm like, this has been here the entire time. No questions asked. This wasn't just plopped in because we got to fill space. I can tell in every nook and cranny within every map I've explored within Guild Wars, there's a reason why these people are here, and like, why is there shipwrecks, or why are their homes filled with many people, and this is a really vibrant community. Like, how is this happening? It's never like something that's sprung up. When you play Super Mario Bros, you get through the grasslands in World 1 and oh, we're in a desert suddenly. It's like, well, how did that happen? There's no like smooth transition kind of thing. I love that about Guild Wars 2, that every map is vibrant. There's so much happening character-wise, map design too. I have to ask though, and maybe then we'll move on away from Lowland Shores, but it's one of my favorite maps. If a player didn't receive a homestead, if we didn't receive that home from Stoic Alder, how much gold a month would it cost a player to rent one of those cozy Kodan houses within Lowland Shores? Maybe it's a rough ballpark. I know we're not landlords here, but I'm curious if the team at ArenaNet has thought about this.
Yeah, so I can jump on this one. So it's probably a little bit more of an abstract answer, because when we were approaching like the Kodan culture specifically, like we wanted to build a culture around them, and we built a culture of balance that very much demonstrates who they are as a people, and they're used to living in the rugged wilderness and needing to utilize what they have, survive in nature, use every part of the animal, use every, like, reuse all of the wood that they use to make their buildings. Like, it's balance, it's respecting nature. So I don't know if they would, like, be stingy in terms of gold amounts. Like, I don't think there's a Tom Nook, but I feel like in absence of making us pay a bunch of money, and I don't want to know what, like, Divinity Reach rent would cost, they would probably more so like trade expertise, trade effort, trade talent. So like, help us protect this village. Def Lahar would probably make us like do all sorts of lumbering all over the place. It would probably just be a matter of like doing favors for these people and letting them know that like you respect their culture, gaining their trust. Trust is a big thing in game development too. And it goes both ways. They'd probably just put the poor commander through a whole bunch of work, probably.
Good to hear. And you brought up the rent prices for Divinity's Reach. Yeah, no, that's like a Manhattan, one bedroom you're paying to live in a shoebox kind of thing. So, but really cool that's the vibe. And that's kind of how it is before you get your homestead, you're collecting wood and using your war claw to do all that stuff. So it's really cool to hear, like, you probably maybe aren't paying gold, but your back's going to hurt in the morning because you've been doing lawn care, gardenscaping, like all that stuff. So in previous expansions, we've seen big meta events, basically the giant attraction site all the players run to. It's basically like a neon sign glowing saying, hey, come over here, there's a huge thing happening. With Janthir Wilds, though, genuinely curious why the team shifted away from adding in big, I guess named meta events is what I'd kind of call it. Should players consider meta events, like map-wide meta events, to be like a thing of the past, or could we potentially expect to see them in the future?
Are we never going to see them again? Unlikely, right? Like, everything that we create within our game is essentially a tool that we use to serve our goals, right? We try to take the player perspective and the player feedback into account a lot, as well as like holistically what we've been doing long tail. So we look at every expansion, we look at what we've done previously, and we try to see like, what are the areas that we have not supported recently? What are the areas that we have not tackled recently in terms of content? And as well as like, what have we done and how are those both going to serve our current needs and goals? Metas are a tool in our toolbox to be able to set the narrative up for success and to set the world up for success, right? Like a cross map wide meta like you'd see in Drizzlewood Coast probably wouldn't serve well in a very cozy and comfy environment. For Lowland Shore in and of itself, we heard a lot of player feedback around people wanting something that's a bit slower, a little bit more Grothmore or even Xingje-esque, which as somebody who worked on Xingje, I totally get that. It's one of my favorite maps I've worked on outside of Lowland Shore. It's essentially looking at that player feedback of we want something that's a little bit slower and then seeing like, okay, well, metas holistically are something that require a lot of group play and a lot of investment. So we think that might not best serve our goal in this space, what we're trying to do in this map. With Janthir Sentry, something very similar, right? Where it's like Janthir Sentry is meant to be a place that is a little bit more barren, right? A little bit more like wild, trying to create something that is going to allow for that holistic through line structure to lead to that space can be a little bit more complicated, right? So it's like the thing that's cool about world bosses is that like, unlike metas, world bosses just get to exist, right? They just get to exist in that space. They get to have that space shift around them, and then you just go fight them. Kind of having something that allowed for more of a world boss tonal feel, I think better set that map up for success as well. We love making metas. We've got a lot of people that love making metas, myself included. And so I don't think that that content is ever going to disappear, right? Similarly to Hearts, right? Like people would think that Hearts would have disappeared, but in Janthir Wilds, we reintroduced them and we changed the system a little bit to support that player feedback. So ultimately, I might be rambling, but the TLDR is essentially like, we use them when we want to and when we need them. And for Janthir Wilds launch, that did not serve our goals, but that doesn't mean that you won't see them potentially in the future.
I love how you put it. It's a toolbox at your disposal. Want to figure out what is the goal for this specific map in this area. If you're going to add meta like boss that's there, a bunch of people are going to be there at one point in time. I can only imagine it would probably be not the best thing if all of a sudden Suwon appears in the middle of this Kodan village in Lowland Shore is like, maybe new players are going to be loading in here. Like, let's not overwhelm them kind of thing. So I like that you put it that way, Nick, where it's not disappearing. This is something that we use when we think that the map needs it. And that's just really cool to see the kind of thought process for the team and how they add these things. So a lot of things within Janthir Wilds, one of them being features, many different things, homesteads, spears. Blish isn't around, but it's okay. But regardless, like there's a lot of cool features within Janthir Wilds. I was super excited to wield the spear. Like I was like counting down the days, like can't wait to be throwing a spear as a thief. And then if you get in my way, like I'm going to smack you with the spear, like super hyped for it. But I was genuinely surprised, like riding around on the Warclaw revamp was such a blast. It's kind of like a mid-flying mount at one point when you upgrade the masteries and you're jumping a bunch of time. How does the team kind of introduce these features to players? Because it's not really like, what's a good example? It's not like Ritlocks coming to your door and dumping off a bunch of features like, hey, thanks for participating in the expansion. Here's your spear, here's your Warclaw. Like that doesn't really happen. It's not like an Amazon delivery. You kind of got to slowly introduce these features to players. But what does the team at ArenaNet kind of think about before introducing a core feature within expansions to players?
Yeah, like you said, we didn't want to just be like, all right, here you go, like with no sort of like relationship to like the expansion and the theming and the culture of the Kodan and all of that. So one of the things that we had talked about early on is like trying to make sure that these things feel very like integrated into the world, like a part of the expansion, not just sort of like tacked on. That's why Spears and Warclaw and Homesteads are all like directly integrated into the story. But the thing there is that I wanted to make sure that like we've definitely integrated like features into the story in the past. I wanted to make sure that like you also don't have to play through 75% of the story before you actually get your hands on like these key parts of the expansion. You'll notice that they're all like front loaded in the story. Like you get the Warclaw on, like if you don't have it already from World v World, you get it unlocked in chapter 1, and Spear is directly afterward in chapter 2, and Homesteads are in chapter 3. So chapter 1 is in like a story instance before you actually get to open world Lowland Shore. So that way you have the Warclaw available to you like for the first time that you step foot in open world Lowland Shore. So that way like the map content can be tailor made for like everyone having a Warclaw. We don't have to play that game of like, does somebody have this, does somebody not, like how does this content feel without it? Like it means that by the time you get there, you'll be able to like fully engage with like that content. So that sort of helps support things too. Yeah, I definitely wanted or I keep saying I, but it's very collaborative. It's we wanted to make these things feel like a part of this world. The Warclaws are like a key feature of like Kodan culture. Like they raise them, they use them for like navigating this like rough terrain. The spears are stuff like a weapon that they use in everyday life for existing in this like harsh environment and hunting and doing all of the things that they do in their culture. And then like the homesteads are like very like integrated into their culture because it's like and like the cozy vibes of the expansion, like having a homestead master on the Kodan Council, Def Lahar, and making these things like feel like a part of the world that you're in. When designing story, like we made sure to kind of have like moments carved out for these things to happen, but early enough that like you're not sort of waiting to be able to access them.
It's a balancing game that you play as a developer to be like, we have something that's really cool, but we don't want players to wait an eternity to have it. And it's got to make sense as well. If I was a new player and I got Warclaw, here's your homestead, here's your spear, like as soon as you enter Janthir Wilds, I'd be like, well, wait a second, hold on, like can I just take it one step at a time? And I think how you guys implement it, very still early on, you're not like playing for hours to try and get something, but if it's something where people want to have it, they'll get it early on and they'll get an introduction as to why it's there. I don't know, if you guys add space guns or something in the future, cool, but you guys will probably introduce it in a way where it's like, it makes sense to be there in the environment. Maybe the Asuran got some technology or who knows. And spears fit perfectly within Janthir Wilds, the skins for the spears that you're using, that like one of the first ones you get, I was like, am I even gonna change this one? Like this one's great. Whatever artist worked on this, like well done. So yeah, I like how you guys slowly have introduced features within the game, and that's just a great balancing act that you have to play as a developer. And I think you guys have really mastered it, creating Guild Wars, this MMO. With every single MMO, when you get a new expansion, some people might think, oh, new weapons. Other people might think, okay, what area in the map do we get to explore? And other people put on their headset and they're like, time to listen to brand new music. Like, it's time. With every expansion, we get new music. It's incredible to hear. It's awesome. Makes you feel different ways. How does the team write a story, create maps? First, is it with a music track in mind? Is the music written like last minute? What's kind of the process with making music match up within certain areas in the game?
So generally, the team will have the story written, the maps are created, and then the characters are made before the music comes in. So a lot of that groundwork is laid first, and then the audio team will come in, sort of have discussions about what sort of tone is happening in this area, what sort of events are happening in terms of specifics like combat. You want more intensity in the music. In the case of Janthir Wilds, we have the dance circle, so anything specific to that area that would require audio. So it's more after that stuff is developed that the music comes in, but then there is still some collaboration in terms of Indigo and I named the soundtracks for Janthir Wilds once we got them back and heard them. Yeah, still a group effort effort, but the music tends to come in after the main stuff is written and the tones are established and all that.
Are there I have to ask this question, if the music team, when they create a song, do they typically have a name in mind and they name it first and then the writing team goes, yeah, we're not going to call this song Epic Battle Music number 24. It has to be something specific. Do they ever say, we think the name should be this and you carry on with it? Or do you just get Untitled Music Track 11 and then the narrative team gets to run with it?
It's kind of the latter. So the audio team, and very specifically, there's a composer named McLean that we work with a lot. And there's a couple of other individuals as well whose names are escaping me. Sometimes we'll get a creative idea for a thing, and then sometimes it's just wilds _ daytime _ 006B. And we just get to have fun with it. But it's very fun. We usually have an email chain between the composer, our audio team, because our composer is external, where we spit back ideas, and he's a big fan of us and we're a big fan of him. So and you probably noticed with the Janthir Wild tracks, especially when it comes to naming, we went a little bit more abstract with a few of them, like this Unknown Hemisphere for the main, which one was one that Erin named for the main. I think it was the Lowland Shore daytime track, I believe. McLean just is loves it. We love it because, he makes audio poetry to honor his work with a really cool name.
That's really cool to hear the collaboration that you guys have. Again, it's not just one person doing everything. It's multiple different people, multiple different teams to create something that's truly epic for players to enjoy. One thing that is always added, though, with every expansion, we covered weapons, we covered new features, we covered characters, maps. I gotta say it. Everyone gets a new launcher to look at before they log into Guild Wars with every new expansion. Last expansion for Secrets of the Obscure, we had Zoja on there. I think for Heart of Thorns, if my memory serves me right, Ritlock was on there, and it's just so cool to see characters on the launcher. We gotta know, what's the decision behind what character arrives at the launcher? Because I'm genuinely curious if it's a voting thing, if this is something that's just kind of discussed over a lunch break at ArenaNet. Is there a lot of thought behind what is appearing in the launcher? Because at the end of the day, when I open up the game, what I see first is really going to hit me. It's like the cover of a book that you read. Let's break the rumor. How do characters end up on the launcher? What's the process look like?
Yeah, absolutely. We're similarly super excited about the launcher. It's almost like Christmas every time we get to see it. Deciding on it is all things. You're probably seeing a trend of a lot of our discussion is that there's a lot of collaboration that goes into pretty much every single decision that we make, especially when it comes to those big visual staple points like the launcher. Probably the same lessons can be applied to the character select screen as well. It is something that is usually developed and owned by our art team, but it happens in super heavy collaboration and feedback phases with everybody else. So usually the various leads on the teams, whoever else we can kind of get into the room, narrative, open world, design, everybody participates, especially with something like a character select screen, which is also going to have audio in there too. We usually start those conversations from a place of the tone that we're reaching, as well as trying to find what key elements we want to display. This was especially important for Janthir's, because while we had some really cool tonal characters, we were also introducing a whole new culture of Kodan. So we had a lot of things that we wanted to showcase first and foremost. So tonally, we kind of looked at the overall expansion structure, which, as everybody has kind of hinted at, the first act of the expansion is very cozy and comfortable, focusing on less world-ending affairs and more getting to know this culture that we've established before that tension starts to rise and that coziness is shattered a little bit. So we knew that we wanted to start the launcher from a place of kind of that unknown wilderness that we were going to be setting off into. We also knew that some of our literal key elements that we wanted to display were things like the bearkin or the Kodan. The spears were another. And these were all things that kind of went back to that tone, which was going off into the wilderness, a little bit rugged. And you even get a peek of the village in the back of it too, if I'm remembering correctly, which is just excellent and beautiful, and we're big fans of our art team, and whenever they come to us with ideas, it's just really exciting. Tonally, yeah, we were looking to kind of the rugged nature of Janthir, showcasing the Kodan and the spear that establishes that we're going into a place that we're not necessarily in our wheelhouse as the commander. We're doing something new. We're on uncharted territory. Janthir is going to be a little dangerous unless if you're a Norn and it's kind of your wheelhouse already. But generally, that's what we're leaning into. A little bit of the mysterious seriousness of this culture that we're teasing when you first open that the launcher after downloading the expansion. It's just a little teaser of what's to come. So for this time, given all of those elements and kind of re-establishing our footing on mainland Tyria, that's kind of the things that we were going with. But heavy collaboration, we involve a lot of people in those cycles, and our art team they just love giving us ideas, and they'll put so many in front of us just to collect feedback. And they're a really great team to work with because kind of like in game development in general, it's a lot of iteration. We're never married to our first idea. So lots of back and forth, lots of, like Nick said earlier, lots of discussion all the time, especially about these capstone pieces that people are going to be spending a lot of time with.
Really cool. I love to just learn what goes on behind the scenes. And I think a lot of people listening probably are genuinely interested about how did Janthir Wilds get to be Janthir Wild? It takes multiple weeks, multiple months before something maybe is like, okay, this is what we're moving forward with. And I can only imagine whatever artist drew or came up with that bear and the spear is like, wait, that's on the launcher? Cool, great. Like, I didn't know that would be featured there, but it's so cool to see so much collaboration between all teams to make everything possible. Even as you mentioned, Indigo, the character select screen, what's happening in the background, that's also music, animation, like all that stuff. This is a question for everyone on this call right here. If you had to spend one day in Tyria with one character, whether it's, defending Divinity's Reach from centaurs with Logan Thackeray, maybe you're tinkering around with golems and Timey's workshop, picking apples in the field with Tybalt Leftbaugh. I had to bring that one up. It's a very tough pill to swallow. But like, which character would you hang out with, and what activity or adventure would you go on with this character?
Okay. Oh God, this is always a really tough one because it's picking your children, and it probably changes for me every single day. I think last time we spoke, I said Anise, and I would usually always say Countess Anise just because I adore her. But having spent a lot of time in her head recently with Janthir Wild, probably need to mix it up. I would probably, for the sake of adventure, go on some sort of heist with Canuck. I feel like I'd probably end up in jail, which would not be ideal. I don't know if it would go well, especially. I don't know how practiced he is at this point in time. He might be a little shaky, but I feel like that would at least be like a fun adventure. He'd be a good time. Even if we ended up in jail, we'd probably be cracking jokes about it the whole time. So that sounds great to me.
What an awesome pick, too. A heist with Canuck. What could go wrong?
It'll be fine.
I think for me, it's a toss-up between two characters. Two characters I would want to spend the most time with is either Air or Malice. They're both very dear to me. I like both of those characters a lot. I especially like Malice because she's very we kindred spirits. Like I mentioned before, I have a female char thief who is Ash Legion. So it's just okay, I want to get more into that sort of subterfuge and being all sneaky. So I'd say going on some sort of reconnaissance mission with Malice would be the coolest thing ever. I also really love Air. Either going exploring the wilds with her or working on art projects while she does sculptures and stuff. And I love Air a lot. I even cosplayed her a number of years ago. So yeah, I don't know which one I could choose more, but those both seem like really cool characters, really awesome ladies that I would want to just spend some time with.
I like how everyone who's answered so far has picked maybe two characters they'd like to hang out with. It's not just one character. There's always someone else that could be there as well. And your char fits perfectly being Ash Legion. That makes sense why you want to hang out with Malice.
Well, I was gonna say Hanak and hang out in his nightclub with him, but since Indigo said that, I think I will hang out with Rama and track down Indigo and Canuck's heist.
The betrayal, backstab. This is how Indigo ends up in jail. Heist ruined because Erin was there running alongside. Makes sense. Okay, I get it.
If anybody was going to throw me in jail, I'd accept Erin throwing me in jail. I'd probably deserve it if she did.
Or if I wanted to take a break, I would hang out the day with the hot spring bears and just relax.
Perfect. After throwing Indigo and Kanak in jail, we're chilling at the hot tub with the bears, long day's work. I got it. I was going to say, have you decided, Nick?
I mean, that's the problem, right? Is like, similar to what Indigo is saying, it's kind of like choosing your favorite child. And on top of that, right, it's layered with an additional kind of mental crux of like, well, it depends on what I want to do. You know what I mean? Because like, I've got the unhinged answer, which is hang out with Lord Farron. And the only reason I really want to hang out with Lord Farron is because I just want to sit down with him, like maybe at dinner, and just listen to him. Like, imagine people watching, but like one-to-one. You know what I mean? Like, I just want to see how he is. I want to like listen to the way his brain works. So there's him, right? But then there's also like Narcisse is a character that's very near and dear to me, right? Like both Narcisse and Zizzle from the Astral Ward. A conversation with her, like any of them, it would be just sitting down at dinner and having conversations with them. But like from Narcisse, it'd be the intellectual side of things because she's very smart and very passionate, but also kind of quirky in a little bit. You know what I mean? Because she like turns the player into a fish and she's like, go swim down the stream for me. And then I guess like I'm gonna be that person and put a third person there as well, which is like Barbed Veil, because Barbed Veil is also another character I loved working on, and she's just such a powerfully strong woman. You know what I mean? So it's like I just want to sit there with Barbed Veil and listen to her talk. But I guess that's just maybe me simping.
No, literally that's what it is. There's so many awesome characters where it's like, can I just talk with you for 30 minutes? Because let's put all three characters that you listed in a room. That would just be hilarious altogether. It could be a podcast episode in itself if those three characters were just chit-chatting. Not sure they'd all get along with each other, but that's just so funny to like think about Barbed Veil, Narcisse, Lord Farron, like all chilling together, and Nick's the one moderating everything, like throwing questions at them. What would I have to pick off the top of my head? And this one's, I don't know, maybe you guys can run with it at one point in the writer's room. I think I've maybe brought this up before, but I'm going to change up the adventure time of things. Blish appears out of a warp tunnel, drops down, and he's like, hey, remember the sword that Air found in the Ascalon catacombs? I'm like, yeah, isn't it Magdir? Or I forget the other, it's not Sohothan, I think it's Magdir. And I'm like, yeah, I remember that. What happened to that sword? He's like, we're gonna go find out. Let's go find Magdir. So me and Blish, we go on an adventure, try to find that broken blade. He's tinkering around with the sword, maybe to fix it. We got to figure out who we're gonna give it to. Probably Logan Thackeray, because I think he was kind of stubborn back in the day. But I'd like to go on a little adventure with Blish. I'd be the tallest character in the room as my human. Blish would be wearing some fancy little vest. I think it'd be a great time overall. And yeah, that would be the adventure I would pick within Tyria. Let's talk about main story. One of the biggest parts are the types of characters we see in an expansion. We obviously have seen new faces like Stoic Alder, Poised Arrow, but when it comes to returning faces such as Kaith, what process does the team take to figure out which familiar faces are meant to sit down on the sidelines and which one are going to join us in this current expansion?
I can speak to this. There's a number of questions that we'll ask ourselves during the initial brainstorming phases and when we're figuring the story out and what we're doing and what sort of tone we're looking for. So one of the things we would look at is who we haven't spent a lot of time with in a while, or who's been around, whose story arc have some threads that we can follow up on, or whose arc fits well with the story that we are planning to tell. So in this case, when we look at Kaith involved in this story, she served as a sort of a parental role to Erin for a long time, and she's dealing with the transition out of that. And that kind of parallels what Waiting Sorrow's going through with her role for Pokey, and sort of starting to act as a somewhat of a stepmom and a mentor figure for him. So that felt like a good narrative pairing to have those two in. Also, people's professions or what they do, like Malice, for example, being Ashlegian, it made sense for her to be here because she's very good at collecting intel. That's a big part of what the Alliance is trying to do here. And also just things like who is an interesting character pairing, like you had just mentioned, having Lord Farron in a room with all those other personalities, who would play off each other in a unique way that we haven't seen, or who have we not paired together before, and what new stories can be told through that. So those are all sort of elements that we consider when we're looking at the cast that exists and who we want to bring into the story in the present.
Really cool to hear that when it's about bringing characters back, there's probably been several several drafts that Erin, you have pitched, or anyone else here in this call, where it's like, what about bringing back this character in some alternate reality, right? You know, Janthir Wilds, we're running alongside with, I don't know, the guy from Lion's Arch who goes, by Ogden's hammer, what savings? And it's like, okay, like, great, I guess he's here, cool, let's do this. So it's really nice, though, that there is some conversations to be had, and it's not just, okay, like, let's just randomly blindfold ourselves and pick some person that is going to join there. So, and this conversation about characters just reminds me that a new raid is on the horizon. I gotta bring it up. I wouldn't be a Guild Wars 2 player if I wasn't talking about new cool stuff coming up, such as the raids. And we'll get to see NPCs in the raids. Like, it's not just, okay, go fight a boss. Like, there's story and elements behind all the raids. We're gonna have both friendly and foe NPCs alongside us within a raid. So I'm curious, with the team at ArenaNet has probably been hard at work threading some big story segments that are maybe bleeding into the raid experience. Is there anything that the team can share about maybe the upcoming raid or characters appearing in it?
So sorry. You did such a lovely and wonderful wind up. Just for me to say stay tuned. You know what I mean? That's really the answer that we can give right now, is just stay tuned.
Yeah, no problem. Hey,
I hope you like it when it comes out.
Looking forward to it. And guys, hey, I tried, all right? If anyone is in the comments like, did he ask these questions? I did. They're here. So if you focus on the story, most of the time it's going to lead you through a lot of the areas in the map. You know, it's going to kind of drag you through specific situations. And a lot of times it won't show you the next map. Like, it'll make sure you can kind of get to, I'd say 60, 70% of the map through what the story takes you through before you're already thinking and seeing the next portal that's there. I think one time I was exploring or doing a story, I think it was in End of Dragons, where I was in the third map and I saw a portal and I was like, what, do I step into it or should I wait? Should I complete the story here? Like, how do we move forward with that? There's gotta be some, I don't know what you would call it. I don't have a word for this, but Chloë, you might have mentioned this, that it's kind of like breadcrumbing. What is the process behind breadcrumbing a player through a main story and having them follow the events that make sense before you're like, okay, we're ready to take them into the next map? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I touched on this a little bit earlier, but it's a lot of collaborating with the map designers and also the map artists on trying to make a cohesive story, like even beyond the like what we call like the golden path, like the actual like what's in the story journal. Like, there's still a lot of story happening in like the map content itself. So like the story chapters can like breadcrumbing you through as sort of a way to be like, what do you think of like this? What if you go engage with this content? Like, when I'm designing open world story steps, I'm thinking about, am I kind of covering at least most of the map to kind of like highlight some of the like more key areas? So in the case of like Lowland Shore, it's let's make sure we spend a little bit of time at Harvest Den, the main village. Let's make sure we spend a little bit of time, like that's in like kind of this third of the map, and then like let's kind of spend some time in like the middle third of the map where we're like near the fishing village, we're doing homestead stuff, and like by like nature of needing to go pull down the trees with the Warclaw, like that's getting you to range a little bit further than like just the village or just that like immediate area. And then like going to like the like western third of the map, that's where like I'm designing story steps where it's like, okay, engage with this heart, because then that kind of fills in, like helps support some of the narrative that's happening in like the direct storyline, like utilizing what's in like the map content. And then the heart itself gets you to like kind of range a little bit around that area. And then in the case of like Janthir Century, like because there are fewer like distinct like hubs that compared to like Lowland Shore, when I'm designing those story steps, like I'm thinking about, okay, what are ways that I can get you to kind of see like different like sectors of the map and kind of see what potential there is, so you can go like kind of wander off and engage in like the existing content. When I was like designing story steps, like in what is that, chapter 6, I'm thinking about, okay, well, what's the like narrative goal for like the Kodan being here, for the commander being here? This is like the Kodan are kind of here in that they like will send like scouting parties out here, they have like little like small like hunting camp type things, but like they don't have an established presence. So like it's largely unexplored for like kind of everyone. And so like one of the steps I have is Graced by Fire sends you out to kind of map some more like unexplored pockets of the wilderness, which is what it's doing, is it's getting the player to, those are strategically like placed locations around the map to kind of get you seeing like, oh, here's where a heart is. Here's like some interesting stuff up here, while also filling in the narrative of like the vibe of this map. And so it's sort of dual purpose of like, it serves the purpose for the direct storyline, but it's also leading the players to potential gameplay moments. So there's a lot of thought into like when I'm planning like early on in like the development process, when I'm just like doing paper designs, like the early, before I'm even implementing, like I'm just writing the design document of like, what are we doing? I'm like looking at like our rough version of the map and being like, okay, if I have, you know, this section here, like what does that path look like through the map? Like, is that kind of hitting on like the major beats? The chapters sort of like help lead you through the map while also telling more like direct story. So yeah, it's a lot of collaborative stuff. Story designers are often checking in with map designers like, okay, what are you doing with this heart? What are you doing with this event? Like, could I maybe like hook story into that? Can I kind of make use of that? And then there's also like a balance between like having bespoke story steps that exploring or using like also in chapter 6, like using the little like the Kodan bow to like dart and like tag animals. Like those are very bespoke things that are only exist for that story step, and like trying to find a balance between that and plugging into existing map content without, in a way that best serves that map content and highlights it rather than makes it feel like a chore to engage with it. Like I want it to be an enticing thing to suggest that you interact with rather than like you must do this. So like I kind of pick and choose my moments on like, yeah, I want you to engage in this heart because I think it's important for the narrative. But like I might have other situations where it's like less direct or a more open-ended like, why don't you engage in these events in this area? So it's kind of finding a balance between both of those things.
Got it. That makes sense then. And I just want to share my time playing through any expansion within Guild Wars. How I play is what I'll do. I say 100%, and this is mostly like when the game says you 100% a map. Maybe it's a hot take for some of the community out there, but even if the map says you 100% a map, like you haven't seen everything in terms of like, there's an event happening here that wasn't active and I didn't get to experience. But before I even enter a new map, I did this with End of Dragons. I did it with Secrets of the Obscure. Best believe I did it with Janthir Wilds. Like before I get to the next map, before I go through that portal, even if the story's like, get your butt in there, I go, hold on a second. I haven't gotten that little icon on the map completion. I'm going to explore everything, do a couple of events here and there. That's interesting to see that even as you do the main golden trail of the story, it's intentional to map it out and encourage exploration. Sometimes I'm like, oh, I got to stick to the golden path until it's bringing me into the next map. I kind of backtrack and go, okay, let's go explore some things. Then sometimes I'm playing for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and I was like, wait, wasn't I doing the main story? I just did like 3 events back to back, and how did I end up over here? Like, let me waypoint real quick. So really cool to see that.
I'm so guilty of that too.
Oh, I think all Guild Wars 2 players at one point, it's like, what was I doing again? I was working on crafting this legendary. So I love that about Guild Wars, and that's what makes this MMO one of the many things super enjoyable. I do want to focus at the story because at the end we got something really cool. When you wrap up the story experience, players are rewarded with a combat tonic. For those who don't know what a combat tonic is, essentially it turns you into something completely different. You're no longer your wonderful looking Asura. You're now suddenly like I don't know the name of it off the top of my head. My example, like the scarlet robots that she has, like, and you get to fight as one of those.
Clockwork.
The clockwork. Exactly. Yeah, and combat tonics allow you to still get in combat, but you look completely different. They have one for the Kodan, which is nice, and for this Janthir Wilds, you get to look like a very adorable looking bear Kodan if you complete the story. Spoiler alert, but hey, it's been over a month. I think you guys probably have completed it. With the addition of combat tonics being added, it's almost like players get access to a new race, minus all the fun things we receive with a full race, like, you know, we need a voice actor who's got to be there. Character customization takes some time. Is it completely out of the picture to consider new races appearing in future expansions, or are combat tonics gonna be the go-to?
So I can jump on this one. At this current time, it's not something that we're currently looking into. It just doesn't quite line up with our current development roadmap and how we're allocating resources. But we are glad that we do have things like Combat Tonic to be able to at least get a little bit of that player fantasy. So for now, stay tuned on that, but it's not currently something we're working on.
Awesome. Well, I'll be running around. I have them. I have them every now and then. I'll trigger a Combat Tonic, and it's always funny when people are running around. You're like, wait a second, Kodan or in the? Oh yeah, he's got a Combat Tonic on. No, okay, that makes sense. As we wrap up this episode, because I want to make sure the folks at ArenaNet can head back to town. Nick said they're working on the next raid experience, so I don't want to keep them away for too long, guys. But as we wrap this up, I asked them a lot of different questions, all revolving around Guild Wars 2. But we're all gamers. You know, a lot of us play different video games. So let's think about gaming as a whole to end this episode. Which video game did each person here grow up playing that changed their life? And I'm not talking like I played, I don't know, some random example video game and oh my gosh, like now I'm living like Gandalf. Like, no. Like, but what is a video game that you played when you were maybe growing up or as a young adult that is really like, wow, this really clicked for me?
The problem for me, at least, is that I'm not good at choosing a singular thing. I think way too much as an individual. And so, like, my answer would have been, you know, on the onset, like World of Warcraft, because when I was really young, I wanted to play World of Warcraft so badly that I opened up a Paint doc after I saw a commercial and just like typed it in and then saved it on my PC back when I didn't have internet, right? Just so one day I could remember that I wanted to play this game. And I did end up playing a lot of World of Warcraft. I think that like while that helped me understand that I wanted to like fall in love with MMOs, I think the thing that really seeded me was this game series called Dot Hack, and it's really obscure. A lot of people probably don't know about it, but more specifically the Dot Hack GU series, because there's like two canonical series of games. That allowed me to get that feel of like in a video game world, right? Like in an MMO, while still being able to like actually play through it as somebody who didn't have internet back then. And I think that like just playing through that entire series, getting to fall in love with the characters, getting to interact with the characters as you would if you were actually playing an MMO, the actual gameplay in and of itself, that game really, I guess, rocketed me forward in terms of like falling in love with the MMO space, wanting to have gameplay like that. And then like up until now, right? Like getting to actually create games like that and hopefully create those experiences for people. I think in terms of like narrative though, this is going to be real bad, but I really fell in love with Kingdom Hearts as a little kid as well. And so like narratively that made me fall in love with like the narrative of video games, the interpersonal relationships, especially, and wanting to create those memorable moments for players.
You brought up Dot Hack and I was like, oh, I don't know that. But then you were like, Kingdom Hearts. I think I know that one. I don't know off the top of my head, but I might know that one. But yeah, good choice
also
overall.
Super obscure series.
Yeah, not something that's really well known. Yeah, like in terms of gaming with other MMOs, it was really cool that you brought up World of Warcraft because that also kind of deep dived you in. But the fact you didn't have internet and you're like, man, how do I get that feeling of WoW is just really cool that you're opening up a doc to try and like have that in there. So really cool, Nick. Thanks for sharing.
I think for me, I'm again going to have a little bit of a toss up between two choices because they're quite different. I think for me, the first one is Elder Scrolls, like Oblivion specifically. Like, oh man, did I play a lot of that. I ended up also like Nick, like eventually playing a lot of WoW, but like I was playing so much like Oblivion when I still had dial-up that I couldn't play WoW on. And so like that was like scratching that sort of like fantasy RPG sort of itch. But that game means a lot to me and has like had a lot of influence on me because of the storytelling. The environmental storytelling is like huge in that game. Like it's not all specifically dialogue or text or stuff. It's like the stuff that you sort of happen across in the world, these like interactions that you have, finding camp or like some items that are like kind of telling the story that you sort of have to fill in the gaps and infer like what does this mean? What was happening here? And just like the like just vast variety of things that happen in that game and the things that you can do. It's so open-ended. And I think that was kind of like experiencing that, like I think kind of was sort of like the gateway into me just like really liking MMOs because of that sort of open-ended, how do you want to approach this game? What are you going to do? What do you pick and choose? Which sort of quests are you interested in? And then the other one for me is it is a game on the 64. It is Space Station Silicon Valley. And some people know about it, but not a lot of people know about it. But it is, a delight of a game. it's 64 graphics, so it's like a little, like it's obviously showing its age, but like there are certain games where you go back and play and it's like, I don't know if I remember it. Like I remember it being a little more fun than this. It's like, but this one is like, I go back and play it all the time. It's like the short version is you are a robot and you have crash landed in a ship with like your human companion who stays on the ship. And you've crash landed on a space station that is basically like experimenting on like making robot animals. And so like you are a robot, and when you crash, like your little chip comes out of you as the robot and you have to like get into an animal, like a robot animal. So basically the game is spent hopping between different robot animals, and like that changes up how like you play the game. Like as a sheep, you can kind of like balloon, like kind of like Kirby, like kind of float along. And so like that lets you get far like away ledges. There's a little mouse that's like motor powered on little wheels, and it's like zooming along, and like it's got like exhaust coming out of the back of it. Like it's very silly, it's very cartoony, but like there's such interesting like mechanics there, and it's like the music, like the soundtrack is just very good. Like it just has this whole vibe of just like very cheeky and just fun. I don't know. I think back to a lot of times where I'm like, there's definitely times where I'm like designing something and I'm like, wouldn't it be fun if you could just kind of like float along, or like, you know, or like be a walrus with like rocket launchers. Like that'd be cool to like fire those. You know, like there's just like such weird stuff in it that like it definitely has like the like there's so much like creativity there that it's just like it's so much fun. It's such an inspiration. Like I highly recommend playing it if you can somehow get your hands on it, because it's like such a good game.
The sheep example you brought up really made me think, oh, that's how they implemented the war claw, because I really felt like I was like floating around when I have these jumps. Like, that makes sense. Cool. And you did bring up Oblivion. I was on, I think this was like 8 months ago. I was on public transit. I was on a bus. I was taking an hour and a half bus ride to a different city here in Germany. And believe it or not, one guy had his laptop out and he's playing Oblivion on the bus. I'm like, nice, pretty cool. So people are still playing these games that you guys bring up today, and it's just so cool. The inspiration for gaming of titles you grew up playing is still there and in your head on a daily basis. So really cool.
I'm always grateful for having parents that were very supportive of the art. So they were like, if you got your homework done, we don't care how much video games you play if you're doing okay. So I think my brain is an SNES at this point. It was just such a pivotal part of my childhood. My cousin gave me, he had gotten two somehow, so he gave me one and a bunch of games. So the foundation of my being is like Earthbound, Final Fantasy II, Soul Blazer, Link to the Past. But I could go on forever about the SNES. I was thinking about this exact question not that long ago, because I was talking to a poor college class that had to listen to me ramble for a long time. And I've been thinking a lot about how influential like the Metal Gear Solid games have been for me as a not just as a writer but as a game designer too. That franchise is just absolutely fantastic. And very specifically, I've been thinking about Metal Gear Solid 3, Snake Eater, and what that did for me as a writer in terms of demonstrating how a game and a very long franchise can go back like 30 something years before certain events happen, and you can really see backstory. And it's kind of like Metal Gear Solid 3 is like Better Call Saul. It's only something that it really shows you that even going back into the past for something like that, you can highlight the game experience and the narrative experience of everything that came before it, of everything that comes after it. It's a great game for people that love lore, and it's just a really great character payoff. So I've been, especially when you think about narrative and stories at such large scales with something like Guild Wars, where it spans across multiple games, and you think about, we've been talking a lot about that with Janthir specifically, like how does this connect to things and characters and places that have seen multiple iterations of time. There's just something very clever when you can pull off those connections and make the world feel very lived in. Snake Eater for me, it really was like the last like couple of years where I've been like, wow, that blew my mind, and it continues to be really great. And I know it's a hard one to recommend, because I'm also like, you can't start with Snake Eater. You have to start with all of the other ones first. So that's a hard thing to recommend to people. But when you do that build up and you play all of the games and you really like, and they're just fantastic games anyway, like Such a beautiful interweaving of narrative and gameplay specifically. Another big part of who I am. But yeah, Snake Eater for me has been really interesting and how pivotal it's become for me as a writer.
So many awesome narrative games it has brought you to where you are. Like these are some of the inspirations that you have on your head. I have to say this because it just clicks. Like you said SNES and you said, you know, games like Earthbound, you're like, cool. If we have like little mushrooms running around, like chasing you and like infecting your character, like the fact that you have random stuff happening in games, but it can like, it fits the vibe for certain games. And you brought up like the Metal Gear series, like things kind of go out the window sometimes when you play a Metal Gear. You're like, well, wait, this is happening in this? And one of them I read online, like you have to take out your memory card or something and plug it into a certain slot, or your controller. Like so many cool things happen within the Metal Gear series. So awesome examples that you set out, and really cool to hear that these are the games that are near and dear to your heart.
I would say definitely Ocarina of Time. I've always loved the Zelda series. I think Ocarina of Time came out when I was about 5 or 6. The first Zelda game I had played was A Link to the Past, like Indigo had mentioned, but I feel like Ocarina of Time was the first time that I really felt like immersed and lost in the world of a game. Like everything about it felt so epic playing it as a kid, like in the sense of it being cool, but also it just feeling like an epic story, like a literary type, and just like all these like good environmental storytelling. All the areas and the people you meet feel really distinct and different. When I write now, like I keep a lot of Zelda NPCs in mind for how quirky and memorable like specific ones are and how much they stand out and make the world feel alive. That game in particular always stands out as what first got me interested in games and just kind of like world building as well. As an adult now, I appreciate Majora's Mask a lot more too. It was very unnerving as a kid, and it's still unnerving to play it as an adult, but I really like what they were doing there as well. And then just the comment about the putting the memory card in and stuff, that just reminded me of on the GameCube, Eternal Darkness is also one that I really like, just for in terms of like breaking the fourth wall and like kind of redefining what the bounds of a game are and how you can affect the player, not just in the gameplay, but like other elements you incorporate into it. So that one always stands out to me as well.
Really good choices, and I'm happy that you brought up Majora's Mask. Skull Kid's on this arm too. He's there as well. But like when it comes time to Legend of Zelda games, like there is a genuine sense of adventure and just so many bizarre characters too. Like the giant fairy, the wandering salesman with all the masks on his backpack. Like there's just so many cool characters within the Zelda universe that every single Zelda game you play, it's like you don't know what you're going to get yourself into. Like Nintendo definitely cooks up some great titles, and that's really cool. I have to ask Erin, if Ocarina of Time was like one of your favorite titles and Majora's Mask, have you ever tried to play an Ocarina in real life?
No, that would be painful for everyone, so I'm going to spare everyone of that and just not do it. Just admire ocarinas from afar.
To answer the question on my end, I would say I grew up with a GameCube in my bedroom. My parents gifted it to me for Christmas one year. One of my friends was telling me all about Mario in school, like very young. I was in first grade or kindergarten or something. And he had talked so much about Mario. I was like, I don't know what that is. But my parents gifted me a GameCube, and that's when I got to jump into Nintendo games. I played a lot of Super Smash Bros. Melee growing up, and that's so different. Sometimes my 3 other brothers would join, and I would be like, dang, I'm good. But then I would like hang out with friends years later, and then like the internet became a big thing. And I'm like, wait a second. When you fall asleep with Jigglypuff, nothing happens, but I see people kicking butt with Jigglypuff online. Like what? And just the absolute like sheer of realization where it's like, I'm actually not good at this video game. I was good in my household, but to see all these other people do crazy things in games, such as Super Smash Bros. Melee, was like a big realization to me. And I love seeing that in games like Guild Wars 2. I'm like, I'm pretty cool at the thief. Like I can kick butt. And then I see other people play the thief. I'm like, I'm not good at the thief at all. I gotta take a course or something, or read a book of like how to play thief for dummies or something. So just the multiplayer aspect of video games, for me, Super Smash Bros. Was that growing up with friends and my siblings. But now it's with multiplayer MMO games, and Guild Wars 2 is one of my favorite titles. And I could answer this same question of games that meant a lot to me. Like I've played Guild Wars 2 growing up. It has taken me through being a teenager to a young adult, and now I'm 28 years old, and I'll still be playing Guild Wars the next 5-10 years. Like I'll be logging in Tyria. So I do want to thank everyone in this call for joining me. Really thank you guys for taking the time to chat. Anyone who's watching or listening right now, you're welcome to leave comments down below. Other than that, I will see you all in Tyria. Janthir Wilds has a lot of updates coming for this year and next year, so I'm looking forward to it. Thank you all. Stay hydrated, and we'll see you in the next one.